let you introduce you all introduce yourself. So let's just go ahead. Tim?
Who I am and where I...
Who you are, where you are, yeah.
Yeah, who I am and what I do.
You got
Okay.
10 seconds.
Tim Clemensen, and I represent Prime Trust.
Prime Trust.
I'm Pamela Day. I'm the CEO of Paladin Trust, digital asset custodian.
Marshall Broussard, here with Hosho.
Let's turn that mic on.
Gotta turn it on, baby.
I'm Steven Sprague. I'm CEO of Rivetz. I don't need a microphone.
Yeah. All right. Good. Don't give him the microphone. He won't talk. Just kidding. Okay. Great. Let's. I don't know how to approach this subject. We started off with is it a security of code or regulatory custody, and why does an investor care about that? Which is best?
You
Go
know,
ahead.
as a custodian shop, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, there's a natural dichotomy between security and accessibility, and that is a tightrope that we walk every day. Now, you can be extremely secure with an asset if you dig a hole and bury it in the side of a mountain. That's a great idea, except if you actually want to access it, to trade it, or to lend it, or to really do anything with it. So that's why people kind of don't sew their money into a mattress, right? That's not something you can really access. You put it in a bank or you put it somewhere so you can invest it. The problem is, when you're talking about digital currencies, and we all know this, we've got a new platform, a new technology. The more accessible it is, the more hackable it is, or the more potential for hackability. So safety and security generally goes on the opposite of accessibility. The more you access it, the more potentially insecure it is. Think about if you were sending 1,000 bank wires a day, the likelihood of something going wrong.
So
that's the balance that we're talking about.
move it down. Marshall, which would you pick, one or both, or is it a mixed? This is not a binary choice, right?
Absolutely not. And as we see investors, whether they be large institutional investors or regular Steve and Joe investors, come to choose custody solutions or to custody their own funds, it is a requirement that whatever that custody solution is be built with rock solid secure code. So that's where we see that the two are actually dependent upon each other. There are custody solutions that are in the physical space. Yes, I can make a paper wallet, I can bury it in the side of a mountain, and if you're doing a long-term investment, absolutely, that's what you should do. But as you said, if you need that to be hot and accessible, you're day trading, swing trading, then you have to step further and further away from the most secure into what policy you need to put in place for your practical uses. So,
All right.
So I'm going to disagree because
All right.
Custody solutions
We're recording it, so the microphone would help.
Custody solutions are the old-fashioned trusted execution model from the last few hundred years.
Okay.
And what trusted execution is, if I go to a custodial solution and I say, what's your policy? And you can give me a list of what your policy is. Before we trade any transaction, we have a group meeting with 5 people and they all have to say yes. Whatever the policy is. Then you have a second problem, which is, do you have any attestation that you follow your policy? And so that's an interesting challenge. So you hire somebody like Deloitte to come in and watch every day, 24/7 would be ideal if they could do continuous monitoring of your custodial process, because what fundamentally a custodial does is a trust execution process. So the modern solution is we should basically transition the vast majority of that into measured electronics with true hardware roots of trust that we can assure process code properly. So like an F-35 Joint Strike Fighter operating system runs an isolation kernel on top of a chip, and it's very important that the code doesn't bleed into each other, that process A doesn't interfere in any way, shape, or form with process B, because you don't want to have like reset the navigational computer and then you pull back on the stick and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, we had to reboot the navigational computer. So it's unfortunate you're being shot at, but while we're rebooting over here, you can't fly the plane. And so we actually do know how to build extremely high assurance computational platforms where custodialship is designed into the ecosystem and it's continuously processed. The problem with blockchain is that I have to have a custodial solution. I either have to have it human-based, an organization, or I have to have it device-based, but I have no evidence on the chain that the custodial process was done correctly. And so a really good example is if you go rent the movie Crimson Tide. Crimson Tide is a fantastic example where they send a Bitcoin instruction to a nuclear submarine, and halfway through the transmission to the nuclear submarine, the antenna breaks off the submarine. This is the premise of the whole movie. And then the entire movie is them arguing about whether or not they should shoot or not shoot the missiles because they have half the instruction. So they have the instruction, but it's not signed. It says shoot the missiles, but we don't have the signature. And so what you basically have is a wallet arguing whether or not it should execute. It's like a smart contract on a bad day, right? You don't want humans inside the smart contract. And so what you're trying to define here is provable process. What we're missing is if I could have a perfect custodial solution, then I would like a receipt of your signed internal business process. And I would like the receipt of that recorded on the chain. And what that receipt represents is the audit log of the process steps of the custodial solution. Signed off and executed, this door was unlocked, this door was closed, this computer was online, offline, whatever. All those things put together in a chain generates a hash. Record that hash on chain. Now, 12 years later, I can come back and I can ask the custodial solution, whether it's a device or a human-operated one, a simple question, which is, can I see the log files for February 17th at 4:35 p.m. because I have this hash. Can you show me the process steps that generated that hash? And now what I have is provable cybersecurity control embedded in a public decentralized chain that gives me the evidence that the process was followed in real time. That's what we need to do.
We're not even anywhere.
You know what, the one exciting thing about the blockchain industry, I came from decades in the equity world. And while my friend over here is giving the exact target of where we all want to be, where are we right now? As a qualified SEC custodian, for us today, for somewhere to go and have your compliance, your AML, KYC, and custodian accounts for both fiat and token, it is available now. So, while this is a very satisfactory situation for everyone that needs a back office banking solution, which we can provide, in the future, this is where we are exciting, I'm going to make up a word, excitingly going towards.
Right.
But what do we have today? And that's just a comment I want to
Yeah, and I'm left asking, though, whether or not you were describing the buried in the mountain or
No, he's
or
describing
the cash in the mattress.
He's describing where we would all love to be, which is,
Is it
in
both?
a hot environment, which is a fully accessible environment, and super secure. That's the perfect one, right? None of us want to be one or the other. We want to be super accessible and super secure. But to your point, I'll tell you where we actually are. I believed when I first understood what blockchain did, I thought one of the first industries that was going to become the buggy whip was escrow. Escrow should not exist anymore, right? You should be able to make a smart contract, and that's the end of it. Escrow goes out the window. We have an OTC trading desk at Paladin. You would be shocked at how much human escrow work we do to trade digital contracts. And that is absurd to me, but that is what the human psyche needs right now, and we don't have the technology otherwise. I wish we did, we don't. So we actually have to do human escrow work.
So let's swap here to make sure we make use of our time. What do you tell an investor? How do you choose? And we've already determined it's not the binary choice of the mattress or the hole in the mountain. And you need to use the best practices that you can get today. and pray Steve is right, and we're going to get all that. And I think so, right? Isn't that what the future's going to be? And then, so what do we tell the investors?
So I'll just make a little comment,
Yeah.
just a little one. So having spent,
Okay.
I don't know, $550 million plus in this space, building the infrastructure for your custodial solutions,
Right.
and retrofitting 100% of the entire fintech community with a common hardware technology that would allow you to have known devices, so at least you check to see if your computers are yours, would be incredibly useful, which the vast majority of the financial community couldn't even tell me what the technology is. It's IEEE standard, vendor neutral, ships 100% of all PCs and servers. It's common in every box, and you're all using flipping two-factor authentication to log in. So we appreciate the challenge, because I had a ton of work with US government in trying to deploy this into the US Defense Department and into the Information Assurance Group at NSA. By the way, they also have great device identity at NSA. You know what they do? They have a barcode on the outside of the box, and they count them all. They just have no idea what's running inside the box.
Yeah.
Okay? Shh. These are digital devices.
Yeah.
And so literally billions of dollars has been invested in the infrastructure. The really exciting thing about blockchain is that it is impossible to apply the old-fashioned rules of network security to blockchain on a decentralized basis. Chains are censorship-proof. All of network security is censorship. Chains are network security-proof. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And so we have to change the paradigm. We have to understand the centralization model of blockchain, which is, where's the center of blockchain? We don't draw any of the pictures right. The center is your private key. Start by all diagrams by drawing your private key in the middle of the page, and then tell me how you're applying policy. How do you apply policy to the key? How does the key apply policy to smart contracts? Where's the Oracle data come from? Turns out your key is the central component of this decentralized system.
So both.
Right.
It's your mattress,
So
where you store the key, not the crypto.
we have the tools,
Right.
and we finally have the killer app that really desperately needs the tools, because the old-fashioned way of doing wire transfers, where we could actually screw stuff up pretty much and then go fix it, doesn't really work anymore in the blockchain space from a security perspective. So I think actually this will be a catalyst much faster than people think. So we'll give you better than the custodialship relationship on a Telefonica device next year, just built into the consumer's phone.
So, an answer to your question, where do I think, what do investors want? And by investors, I think you mean like holders of crypto, large holders of crypto. What are they going to do with it? I see this space evolving a lot like a regular financial institution space. So we don't see ourselves, we are not a technology company or a financial services company. So you will see these exorbitant rates, which I think are insane, for custodianship, looking at, you know, a point and a quarter. That will go to zero. You don't pay a bank to hold your money. I believe that those rates will go to zero. So firms like ours, certainly what Paladin does is charges as little, oftentimes zero, for the cost of custody. And we make our money on monetizing those funds and those assets on our own. So rather than charging fees, actually coming up with other services. Why would they use a custodian? Insurance, other financial services, other ways of monetizing the assets like staking and things of this nature. So that's where we see this industry going.
And I'm definitely in line with you there. I think not just for custodianship, but for a number of other things that have cropped up here with the rise of blockchain technology. We're going to see that as standards develop, as those practices are vetted and trusted and proven to be secure, that then we're able to have you know, that absolute chain that's right alongside that transaction to say that this was signed within the proper office at this place with this device, and show without needing Deloitte to sit there in your office 24/7 that anyone can run and see that. But it's going to be a number of different things as we mature. We're going to notice that investors will, as newer and better tools become available, as they understand them better and they are proven to be trusted, that I think we'll see a move towards investors taking more of that custody themselves as they are now empowered and enabled to, if regulation is going to allow for it.
Okay.
So change for a second the topic, and let's move from money to data feeding and AI.
Well, can I just make one comment on the security and what the investor looks at? I think we have to remember that there's two types of investors out there. You'll have the institution, and then you'll have, let's call it the other side, the individual or groups or investor clubs. And institutions have a criteria that's probably a lot more involved and with a certain criteria that's necessary for them, and that relies back on the old financial institution of compliancy and SEC rules and regulations. And there's going to be a similarity until it changes. But for this individual investor, to your design, and is clearly a safe a place for an investor, at least for their.
So just for fun, let's have the custodial conversation, but instead of protecting money, which everybody understands we should have all this process around, let's protect supply chain data.
Yeah.
So now what I have is a blockchain supply chain data project, and I want to assure that so the example I love to use, it's really simple, is imagine all the bullets in the Army. 25 guys make bullets, 10,000 guys pull bullets out of inventory. How many bullets are there? Perfect blockchain application because it's decentralized all over the planet, et cetera. Russians steal 3 keys. Oops. So now I have no idea how many bullets I have. So we do all this custodianship for money because we think money is important, and so we invest time, energy, and process in our protection of our money because we get that. For the Army, bullets is a pretty good replacement for money because if you have no bullets, the Army doesn't go very well at all. And so it's interesting to start to say, what does custodialship look like for the keys and process that would have to generate and manage? We need your custodialship at every endpoint in the supply chain.
One of our
to make it work.
suppliers, one of our technical suppliers actually got their start, and still a good portion of their business is securing data. So they just went from data to this type of data, right? So you're right. Why are we only focused on money? Well, because right now that's kind of the only use case for blockchain. But as it expands and you start to have the DOJ, let's say, or the Department of Defense having its own blockchain, now you have to go defend that data and custody that data. We're just not there yet.
The point is that as we look at that ecosystem, there is no cybersecurity. So if we run a public chain, not a private chain, but a public chain, then we have no evidence on chain. So it's important to understand that on public chains, if all I have is the public chain as evidence, I have no information that tells me the data isn't fake. You should assume it is.
Yeah, what we've seen governmental bodies, the FBI being a good example, do in order to try and prove who made this transaction is they're looking at that public chain information, taking those addresses, and I believe my favorite example was linking that back through social media to find those same addresses and link that to actual identities. We see the Japanese government and their national police partnering with exchanges, and they have governmental level KYC AML, such that if there's ever an issue, the exchanges will be reporting with their KYC AML information in order to identify.
But you and I both know that's all fake, because if they know KYC of the person who claimed ownership of the private key, I have no evidence on chain as to the quality of the protection of the private key. I have no governance information. I can't tell the difference between a private key written on the bathroom wall and a private key held in the greatest custodial operation that there is. On chain, they look the same.
Absolutely, and across all of your metaphors about the United States bullets being going from manufacturer out of the end of an M16, that took for granted that the entire system was actually secure, because you said, well, Russia grabbed 3 keys. Well, what if actually one of the functions of add or subtract bullets from this warehouse log wasn't protected properly? Yeah. So instead of it being stealing 3 keys,
we stole a truck.
Exactly. So we have to get to a point where we get to knowing that that key has to be secure and that we are actually being able to prove that, yes, this transaction was done in the proper way by the policy we've dictated or the regulators have dictated. We have to know that we can trust the actual infrastructure itself, the actual code that's executing all of this.
So when we go down security for custodialship and we're talking to the regulators, because we have the potential to apply policy to keys and therefore record evidence, we actually could have compliance that is much more in line with what GDPR, for example, is looking for. So instead of cybersecurity controls done once a year as an audit, what you have is provable controls that were in place at the execution of this transaction, right? And so those things become super interesting because we actually can dramatically improve the governance for what's existed in the past with some very simple changes. But when you look at the ecosystem of what we're building and how we're approaching it with a very 1990s network security attitude, and we haven't really embraced the concept of decentralized power of the key, that the key is at the center. And so if I apply policy to keys, not to networks, then the evidence is bound to the transaction by its nature. And that's what's really cool about this. So it may still be the same things. It may be a Cisco router and its logs and whatever. It's all the same technologies, but the policy enforcement point is not the network, which is where it is in all financial services today. The policy enforcement point is at the transaction formation. That's where we test policy.
So if I'm protecting my key, you're protecting your key, the network is no longer trying to tell us whether there's...
There is no network in blockchain.
Right.
The network is a decentralized collection of nodes.
Right.
Which node did you talk to? Because we got to build a fence around every node. Oh, that's called a private chain.
So I know...
We don't want to do that. We have an infinitely changing network every day. There is no network that we can, like, put a piece of saran wrap around and say, oh, no germs get on the network.
Right. So we no longer rely on the institutional. We don't go to a large company's store and hand them our phone with the SIM card in it and hope that they're going to have a good policy.
Well, actually, we do. So
We
so-
do?
Well,
We're supposed to trust them?
Well, look, if you are managing a pension fund, a $5 billion pension fund,
Right.
the likelihood that you are personally going to feel comfortable keeping that in a ledger in your desk
Right.
is very, very unlikely. So those types of institutional holders have a fiduciary responsibility to do best practices, what's commercially reasonable to ensure the security of those assets. So they really have to, as their job, hand it over to a custodian. And our jobs as custodians is to constantly be striving to have the best policies, the best technology, and the best service, right? But the best safety, security, insurance to do the job of what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Absolutely. It's the classic.
Starting to see that there is a dichotomy here. There is a, do we trust the third party or do we do it ourselves?
No, not at all.
Well, it's still the classic conversation of risk tolerance. As you point out, I wouldn't custody $5 billion of my entire company's pension fund. That would be absurd. But regardless of how secure I think a Trezor is and that the four of us are all, 4 signature required multi-signers on this smart contract to be able to do it, I still would not tolerate that risk, nor would anyone in my company. Exactly. And that's where, absolutely.
That has to be handed off to another company.
Right.
That's how-
All I'm trying to add
Yeah?
is that whether it's run in a Trezor, which is a much lower total, you might put $5,000 in your Trezor or $1 million, you're not going to put $1 billion in your Trezor. That would be silly, right?
I'd use my
Or
ledger.
It's a custodial organization with all its business policy and process.
Right.
Okay? My point is only that the evidence of the presence of the levels of protection should be recorded on the chain.
Which makes it, the smart contract now is smart enough to know whether or not there's security.
It sounds like he's
And as soon as
recommending
security
that,
is broke, the
that-
smart contract can
Just
handle it.
that companies like ours use this type of software to constantly be recording evidentiary, data of what we do for a living. I totally get it.
Right, or even write your own. It's just,
Right.
you could
Yep.
today on every transaction say, this came out of our custodialship. It doesn't have to be, by the way, your name and ID number. It can be a random number, but it ideally could be traceable back so that if somebody ever had a problem with that transaction, in partnership with the owner, because the owner specified the policy rule, you know, mom has to sign off on every transaction over $100 million. Fine. Do we have mom's signature on a piece of paper? And so was that process followed? Can be evidentiarily recorded at a transactional level in real time. So when I come back 10 years later, say, did mom really sign that?
Sure.
We wind back to the core evidentiary proof. And this is what digital signing, digital KYC AML, none of this waving your passport in front of me. I mean, you want to change the world, Wyoming, accept an Estonian identity to open a bank account. I'm totally serious. It's more secure than any other human nation-state credential in the world because they've properly done a PKI, certificate-based proof, because business process for identity is represented by a key. It's exactly the same conversation.
Right.
We're just trying to say that we should begin to trust the crypto of digital signature and digital signing in order to modernize the use of cryptographic money as opposed to being using analog identity.
Yeah, it's better than a photocopy of a signature.
It took me 25
Great.
Cayman photocopies of my passport to have
Let's
a
go ahead and take some questions. We got a question or two. We have very little time. I don't have a mic runner. No. Is there any questions?
Come on, we were a
We'll
little
get
more
on with the
exciting
next
than
one.
that, right?
We're under time,
We're
guys.
talking compliance,
We did it.
escrow.
All right.
SEC.
We'll all be at the dinner if you want to ask us a question. Oh, you got one?
Two-root of trust environment. What kind of services can you add besides secure wallets, and could you add other kinds of services in joint venture, revenue sharing with other decentralized service providers, or is
I'm
this-
going to answer your question in a very simple way. Blockchain's going to deliver for us two things that we've been desperate for 25 years and haven't been able to produce. The first one is the first secure e-commerce transaction. We've never done one. And anybody who's done an ICO wrestles with this understanding. We have no mechanism today for me to easily send you on Thursday afternoon at 5 o'clock my ICO address and then put all your money in it. And trust me, came from me. Okay? Now keep that in mind when you're thinking about, we really have no mechanism to send an instruction to the Hoover Dam to open the floodgates, because that's exactly the same transaction.
Absolutely.
The second thing we're going to get is we're going to get the foundations for the actual use of human identity, which is going to allow us to have cross-border presence for all financial services. And when you look at blockchain, deep down inside this, money's just the demo. If you really want to understand where we're going to upset the apple cart from a regulatory perspective, understand what blockchain enables is secure messaging, end-to-end, for all of IoT, communications, media. And so we're going to remove from the nation state the power of spectral licensing and right-of-way to control what the humans see. And so everybody gets to run their own copy of CNN.
Steve, we're going to have to cut you off here. I understand we have a really important presentation come up, and we want to get it started. So thank you all. And the next speaker will be Steve.